I very rarely watch Question Time in full because I don't really have the discipline or the time to tune in the programs at the right time. I came across an extract earlier about, it was in London, this particular program. If you're not familiar with Question Time, it travels around the country. And basically, there's a panel discussing topical issues, debating topical issues. Um, so Trevor Phillips was there. Trevor Phillips is a former chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and he's a well-known social commentator and former Labour politician. He made some very important points regarding the massive problem we have of youth knife violence in this country. Um, there is an important caveat here. Like I've previously mentioned, the United Kingdom actually has a pretty low overall homicide rate. I mean, we recorded 650 murders last year. That's in a population of close to 67 million. So that's a lower rate than some Latin American cities. I mean, Sao Paulo has more murders than that. That's one city. Just as an example. Nevertheless, where there is still a very serious problem is gang violence. And it isn't just manifested in fatal stabbings, but generic violence and wanting desensitized thuggery, to put it bluntly. Phillips made a lot of important points, and he's got a lot of support for this. Because I think people find it refreshing to see someone speak so candidly. If you don't know, by the way, Trevor Phillips is black. Anyway, he actually said there's now a culture that's going on among some gangs that they're actually stabbing victims in the anus, so they need colostomy treatment. They need a colostomy bag. That shows a level of depraved, well, I'll just say it, sadism that these gangs are capable of. I mean, it's like a war. These people have a mindset of kill or be killed, and it's really frightening because anyone who gets in the way is going to get hurt as well. But what Philip said is it's all very well talk about more police numbers and having this partisan thing over who has more police numbers. I personally think Tory cuts to the police definitely had an effect on this sort of crime. But I think Phillips is absolutely right to say that this is not some sort of abstract thing. You have to be very specific about where the problem lies. And the fact of the matter is, most of the victims are young black men, and most of the killing is done by young black men. It's just an inescapable fact. If you look at the all the young people over the past year who've been fatally stabbed to death, most of them are black, with some exceptions. A young lad here in Sunderland was white, but mostly they are black. So there is a real problem here, um, and that needs to be candidly addressed. And the thing is, I can't help thinking if it was someone else, if saying this, they would be accused of dog whistle politics or pandering to the far right or racism. It's so insufferable that that sort of rhetoric is stopping us as a society really candidly saying this is the problem, let's deal with it. Um, there's no quick fix to this problem, but he mentioned two things I think are important. Number one, he said we need to stop glamorizing gang culture. So we're in a situation where so-called grime stars are held up to be heroes. And I'm not going to name any names, but when you look at the subgenre of grime, drill music, what is it? It is literally thugs boasting about turf wars, promoting turf wars, literally. In fact, I understand it was used in a trial in Manchester. To that end, the judge requested that the drill video be used as evidence. So those powerful people in the industry say, "Oh, you can't attack art; it's got nothing to do with that." People like Stormzy and others who say, "Oh, that's got no relevance," and they're just depicting it. You can't attack art. Rubbish. That is absolute rubbish because if you look at the sort of lyrics the drill music comes out with, so-called music, it's sickening. And I don't mind admitting when I see drill videos, and I have seen quite a few, what are they? You get young guys in balaclavas swaggering with knives. The whole intention is not an art form. The whole intention is to intimidate rivals. And you might think, oh, well, they just attack each other. But any innocent person that gets in the way will be hurt. You cannot have a situation where there is gang wars going on in our capital city. It's just, I mean, London notoriously last year for the first time recorded a higher homicide rate than New York City in the first quarter. And that was shocking, remembering the time in the 80s when New York City, like a subway and the central part of the city, was a no-go zone. Now, London is nowhere near the levels of that New York was then. Like, it's not even close. It is important to stress that. But this is still a very serious problem because these guys will stab each other. And it is mostly guys or some female gang members as well, but they will stab each other over the slightest thing. And the result of that is the brutalization of society. It's it's sinister. So he said we have to be very candid about this. It's not an abstract thing. There is a specific community that this is affecting, which is the black community. Although the last three fatal stabbings were three Sikh guys. So we cannot be politically correct about this. Political correctness will not save lives, will not prevent this problem. I don't think there's any quick fix, but definitely that is one factor. Looking at the glamorization of gang culture. We're still too PC about that. Oh, we better not attack grime music because it's black music, so if you attack it, you're being racist. This is pathetic. You know, this is promoting this is promoting turf wars. People need to wake up and see what it is doing. So I fully support censorship of those sort of drill videos online because spreading them around fuels gang wars. That is a fact. It doesn't. This argument that's just art. You can't attack art, and oh well, it's just expressing themselves. It's so insanely naive. I don't. I'm not saying that it's to blame for all the problems, but I think it's definitely adding fuel to the fire. And those who say it isn't, they're just being dishonest or they're being politically correct. Now, the other thing that Trevor Phillips raised, and this is a very important point, a lot of these gang members came to Britain as children. They were often coming from war zones, countries like Somalia, Nigeria, places that had seen some vicious sectarian conflicts or civil wars. In the case of Nigeria, I'm talking about the Christian Muslim sectarianism there and the Boko Haram insurgency. Somalia obviously needs no introduction, failed state. Um, so, as children, they may see some horrifying things. So they come to Britain, and as Phillips pointed out, they're immediately put into schools and sort of expected to integrate. I really think that kids who are coming in from places like that need a transition period. They need therapy because what happens is they see these horrific things in countries like Somalia and they bring those sort of frankly tribal conflicts onto the streets of Britain, onto the streets of London, Birmingham. I mean, there's a lot of focus on London. Actually, Birmingham is in a pretty bad situation as well. Um, so I think there needs to be a lot of focus on what sort of mental health support children may need. So that you don't have, for example, a 13-year-old coming from Somalia, seen horrifying things. He falls in with the wrong crowd, and then as a 16-year-old, he's utterly desensitized because his whole life he's seen violence. So there needs to be that sort of a transition period and therapy if necessary. I also think definitely tough sentencing for knife carriers. The argument, oh, it's to protect myself, they all use that argument. You cannot have a situation where someone's carrying around a lethal weapon freely. So there needs to be tough punishments for offenders doing this. No more tap on the wrist policies that you get from youth courts. No focus on rehabilitation in these situations. There needs to be a tough deterrent. But I'm not saying that in itself will even solve the problem. There's a excuse me, multifaceted aspects to this. And I think Phillips raised some that are very important. So he needs to be listened to. Those idiots who say, oh, you can't talk about black on black crime because that's racist, it's dog whistle politics, they really need to wake up. If there is no issue with this, then why does the Metropolitan Police have a specialist unit dealing with it? I mean, we can't have a situation where people are now frightened to go out at night time in our capital city, where if they look at someone the wrong way, it's the, oh, well, you've disrespected me, so I'll stab you to death. It's horrifying. And whilst context is important, even London doesn't have the homicide rate of many other cities around the world. One death is one too many. And I think it's shocking because they're young victims, they're teenagers. If it was like, I don't know the precise figure, but let's say 100 young people stabbed over the last 3 years fatally. If that was 100 people, it wouldn't be as, it would still be awful. But I think it's the fact that so many of the victims are young, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. Definitely there needs to be a specific approach to the problem, recognizing the community that is impacted. There needs to be an all out confrontation of the glorifying of gang culture, and the likes of the BBC need to stop promoting it. Like, oh, well, it's just their culture, we can't say anything against it because it's black music in the case of drill, so it's racist to talk about it. We need to stop being politically correct about that. And that third approach of looking at where these young men may have their background from. If they're coming from a war zone, it figures that they could be growing up desensitized if they're not given the right mental health support. And I also would add a fourth, which is definitely tough penalties for knife carriers. No more taps on the wrist from youth courts. I mean, as it stands, and I'm going to talk about this in another video, the approach to youth crime in this country is to focus on rehabilitation before punishment. But to me, that sends out, making, if you have someone who's a knife carrier, right, saying, oh, well, they're 15, so they can't go to jail, so let's just put them on a community program for 3 months, that isn't going to be a deterrent. They're still in the community. There's still, that is not going to be a deterrent. I would advocate a scared straight approach with hardened gang members. Like, really, no beating around the bush. These people need to be absolutely scared straight, quite frankly. I'm not talking about depriving their human rights. I'm not talking about torture or anything like that. I'm saying that we need deterrents that actually scare these guys because at the moment they're utterly desensitized. They don't think twice about stabbing each other to death in broad daylight. So clearly, they're not scared of justice. And the idiots who push identity politics in the sense of saying if you talk about this as racist, they're part of the problem because they're focusing on the semantics of honesty, frankly, of saying that there is a specific black on black problem. That's not to say there aren't also white victims of knife crime, of course there are, but there is a specific problem in London and Birmingham with this. And anyone who is in the wrong place at the wrong time will be targeted as well. I don't think we'll ever have a situation where we'll be totally 100% gone, but we can have a situation where it's greatly reduced. Incidentally, the issue of acid attacks wasn't mentioned. I remember there was a period about 1 or 2 years ago, there was a spate of acid attacks in the capital. To me, that is among the most gratuitous of crimes. That should get years behind bars. We need absolutely strong deterrence on that. But also, I'll add one thing. It's the nature of these crimes I find horrifying. We're not talking about even one-on-one fights. We're talking about a gang, a pack of people, sometimes 20, 30 strong, attacking an individual. I find that chilling. I find that far more disturbing than, say, two guys are having an argument, one of them dies. That's still terrible. I'm not downplaying that. But the savagery of this cardly gang culture, they need to be told that they're cards. They need to be told that that is not being a man ganging up on an individual. That's the behavior of a worm. They need to. That's why I favor a sort of scared straight approach or something equivalent. I'm not saying exactly like the American policy because obviously different countries have different contexts, but something that says to these guys because they think, oh, you're a big tough guy if you're in a gang, you have strength of numbers. That's not bravery. That's cowardice. I would even favor some sort of national service specifically for young offenders in this sense. We really, really need to change the leniency, frankly, that we've been looking at with youth crime. There's a lot of approaches that can be taken, but the political correctness, for example, people being reluctant to criticize drill music, it's um, it's not just music. That is actually fueling turf wars. People need to understand that. That's what it is doing. So I think Trevor Phillips is spot on, and I think he needs support. And I think some of his ideas absolutely need to be further implemented, much more than they are.